Welcome to the Occult London Podcast. This is a podcast dedicated to exploring magic, mysticism, the Kabbalah, as well as other topics. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, please take a moment to leave us a review and a rating on iTunes or wherever you tune in. It really helps more folks find us and helps us to continue to get this message out there. Also, don't forget to check out occultlondon.co.uk to subscribe. And if you're feeling extra supportive, consider backing us on Patreon, or you can find us on Buy Me a Coffee. Every little bit goes a long way in keeping this show alive. And a heartfelt thanks for all your kindness and support. Now let's dive into today's episode. In this episode, we are continuing our history of magical talismans and amulets by focusing on the European Renaissance. This was a significant period of rediscovery, breathing new life into the ancient world's knowledge after a long period of very much church-influenced culture and education. Then around the mid-15th century, we get a really important invention, which is the printing press, coming into play. And this is no minor addition. This was crucial in promoting changes in education, in culture and science, and also it serves as a vehicle for spreading previously hard to find occult information and making those insights and those texts more widely available. In Italy, which was a hub of intellectual and cultural activity at this time, occultists such as Giovanni Pico della Mirandola, 1463 to 1494, and Marsilio Ficino, 1433 to 1499, enjoyed the protection and patronage of Florence's ruler, Lorenzo de' Medici, 1478 to 1521. This support allowed them to dedicate substantial portions of their lives to researching Hebrew, Latin and Greek manuscripts, and also introducing the world to Neoplatonic and Hermetic knowledge. Mirandola demonstrates a really profound knowledge of and interest in the Kabbalah, seeing it as a culmination and really kind of the apex of the Christian faith, and his efforts significantly enhance Christians' understanding of this system, kindling their curiosity in Jewish talisman making and other hermetic arts. And Mirandola's influence is exhibited in his renowned piece Oration on the Dignity of Man, where he explored these themes extensively, writing the following: "We have given you, O Adam, no visage proper to yourself, nor endowment properly your own, in order that whatever you place, whatever form, whatever gifts you may, with premeditation select, these same you may have and possess through your own judgment and decision. The nature of all other creatures is defined and restricted within laws which we have laid down. You, by contrast, impeded by no such restrictions, may, by your own free will, to whose custody we have assigned you, trace for yourself the lineaments of your own nature. We have made you a creature neither of heaven nor of earth, neither mortal nor immortal, in order that you may, as the free and proud shaper of your own being, fashion yourself in the form you may prefer. It will be in your power to descend to the lower, brutish forms of life. You will be able, through your own decision, to rise again to the superior orders whose life is divine." During the Italian Renaissance, as in other periods we looked at, talismans were considered powerful magical objects that could bring about, various different effects, ranging from protection from evil, sickness. Obviously, you had things like the plague going around at that time, so and they didn't have any antibiotics, so things like that were very big on the agenda, as well as protection for travelling, healing, and love and prosperity and all the usual stuff. And the concept of talismans really had its roots in the beliefs and the practices that were brought into Europe through different cultural and religious traditions, such as astrology, alchemy, and hermeticism. So in this period, the study and practice of magic is often intertwined with science and philosophy, and talismans are seen as being a way to harness and direct natural forces for specific purposes. One example of talismans during the Renaissance is found in the writings of the philosopher and occultist Marsilio Ficino. Ficino was a prominent figure in the intellectual circles of the 15th century Florence, and his work on Platonic philosophy really helped to shape the Renaissance worldview. Ficino believed that talismans were created by imbuing a physical object with specific spiritual energies, and that these energies could influence the world around them. He made many talismans himself, often using precious stones and metals to enhance their potency, and described the way they worked as follows. The work of magic is the attraction of one thing by another because of a certain affinity of nature. The Renaissance period also offers, numerous instances of talismanic magic in action. So one example of a magical object which can in a way be seen as a talisman is the Sigillum Dei Aemeth, or the seal of the true God, that was an important part of the magician John Dee's kind of magical tools. John Dee was an alchemist, an occultist, and confidant to Queen Elizabeth I, and is perhaps one of the most famous practitioners of magic. The seal is an intricate magical diagram composed of twin circles of a pentagram, dual heptagons, and a single heptagram, all inscribed with divine angelic names. And it was considered to be a powerful protective charm that was imbued with the powers of the archangels, and also equips the magician with the ability to communicate with these heavenly beings, whilst also warding off evil spirits. In John Dee's writings, they use the Sigillum Dei Aemeth to contact the angels, and also as a kind of symbol of the living God. And it's more than just a magical diagram. It's one of the oldest sources, so the Liber Juratus, the seal is actually in that text as a kind of conduit of power that kind of grants the predestined magician the ability to embody the spirit of God and become a divine figure amongst humanity and all of creation. And it's also thought that the wielder of this sigil could interact with different spirits, archangels, and have control over the elements of every living creature on the earth as well. We can also see various different magical talismans from the Renaissance period in the works of Giordano Bruno, who was an occultist and a scholar and an astrologer. And he had a unique perception of talismans, seeing them as tools crafted by channeling the energies of celestial bodies, planets and stars to manifest specific outcomes. To Bruno, the art of creating talismans and practicing magic was akin to deciphering the mysteries of nature and the cosmos, and kind of really harnessing that raw power for human benefit. And his belief is well encapsulated in this quote: Being is found in all and over all, as there is nothing without participation in being, and there is no thing without essence, therefore nothing can escape the divine presence. Bruno originally was named Filippo Bruno, 1548 to 1600, and he's really an influential figure of this time. He was a philosopher, a poet, a cosmological theorist, and a hermetic occultist, and is particularly celebrated for his cosmological theories. But Bruno not only endorsed the then, quite revolutionarily Copernican model, but also expanded on it. So he actually proposed that stars are distant suns orbited by their planets, so hinting at the potential for these planets to harbour life, which is a theory that's known as cosmic pluralism. Bruno also created many talismans himself, often using astrological symbols and sacred geometry to enhance their power. And he believed that talismans could be used to communicate with spirits and other supernatural entities, and that the will and intention of the operator was an essential part of the magic, as it was a phantasmic process that connected the individual's pneuma with the universal pneuma. By the word phantasmic, Bruno really kind of is talking about this conscious formation of inner images, what we might call thought forms nowadays, within the person's mind, and the desires within the human being, the microcosm, therefore become representative of the forces of attraction that fill the world, or the macrocosm. This concept of pneuma with a P, also known as spirit, is an idea that has its roots really in the Neoplatonism that precedes the notion of pneuma hagion, or Holy Spirit, in Christianity. And pneuma represents the idea that the universe is imbued with a kind of invisible vitality, almost like a spirit or a breath, and is sought to animate the universe like Plato's world soul, or the psyche cosmou. And the idea of the cosmos infused with animism was a kind of idea that was very important to Bruno. And he writes about it in his book Della Causa Principio e Uno, 1584, when he wrote the following: "It is manifest that every soul and spirit hath a certain continuity with the spirit of the universe, so that it must be understood to exist and to be included, not only where there it liveth and feeleth, but it also by its essence and substance, diffused throughout immensity. The power of each soul is itself somehow present afar in the universe. Naught is mixed, yet it is there some presence. Anything we take in the universe, because it has in itself that which is all in all, includes in its way the entire soul of the world, which is entirely in any part of it." So as you can see, this quote kind of really suggests that every soul and spirit connects with the larger spirit of the universe, and that the essence and substance of our souls are diffused really through the vastness of the universe. And in the context of the magical talismans, you can kind of interpret it as suggesting that talismans can contain the essence of the universe and the soul of the world. And if a talisman is created to draw on the power of the universe or of the world's soul, it may be believed to have that power within it. One of the most important texts of magic for this time is the Key of Solomon, or the Clavicula Solomonis, which is a pseudo-epigraphical grimoire, or a book of magic that's attributed to King Solomon, but likely dates from the 14th or 15th century Italian Renaissance, and presents a typical kind of example of Renaissance magic. The book outlines various different rituals and spells for summoning and controlling spirits, demons and angels, and it's attributed to King Solomon, who's said to have received the knowledge of the book from God and then used it to summon the jinn to create his famous temple in Jerusalem. The Key of Solomon is a comprehensive manual partitioned into two distinct sections. So the initial portion outlines the essential implements and methods to actualize the magic illustrated in the book. So it includes the meticulous crafting of magical circles and tools, etc., and the employment of different symbols. And then in the second half, it kind of explores more sort of specific spirits, as well as instructions for how to invoke them and their kind of mastery as well. This is one of the most famous books in Western magic, and although its authorship is still kind of a mystery, it does include quite a lot of different elements that kind of fall into the ideas of talismans and amulets in the form of planetary pentacles. And these pentacles are inscribed with the Hebrew language and embossed with divine names of God, biblical verses, magical squares, angelic names, and Gnostic seals. Pentacles are notably void of any prayers or intentions, and the creation of the pentacles in the Key of Solomon is really an exercise in extreme precision. So it emphasises very much choosing astrological auspicious days and times. For example, I quote, "Take a piece of virgin parchment and write thereupon the divine names of El and of Yahya, and whatever others thou mayest wish, and when the moon is in an auspicious mansion, thou shalt say with fervour of spirit, Grant, O Lord, that this talisman may preserve me from all evil and from all harm, both of body and soul." Also, different talismans will be made from specific materials. So, for example, Saturn talismans will be made from lead, Jupiter, tin, solar or the sun would be gold, as well as being made from specific exercise virgin paper and drawn in the appropriate colours whilst burning specific incense. And although many magicians nowadays use these pentacles as talismans in their own right, this was not really their original intention. They were initially designed to be used when calling a spirit into manifestation during a ritual, rather than being something separate. We also see pentacles in various other grimoires, such as the Heptameron of Peter de Balno, John Dee's Heptarchia as well. And the central idea being that the magician would, by holding the sacred pentacle, you control the spirit you're calling and can ask it to do your bidding. The pentacles focus on the planetary power that the magician desires to manifest. For example, one of the pentacles is described as follows. This is the seal of the intelligence called Yechida, which is said to be the highest degree of the soul of man. Its use is to open the secret places of the earth and to discover hidden treasures, and to bring to pass very many other things, of which this is not the place to speak. Wherefore it is called the most holy and potent of all the pentacles. During this time also the concept of memory palaces or systems experiences a resurgence, serving as effective mnemonic devices for speeches and other learning endeavours. And this involves the imaginative creation of scenes with specific points in the location designated for the placement of images representing the knowledge that the person would like to attain or retain rather. And this basically involved into a system of archiving magical knowledge where the talismanic images would draw the power they symbolised. These images lay the foundation for many magical systems such as the tarot and ceremonial magic, and often find their way into the Renaissance art. And renowned occultists like Agrippa, Marsilio Ficino, Giordano Bruno compiled these images into their magical manuals, often drawing correlations with astrological signs. And the use of these planetary images in magic was based on the belief that they held distinct astrological powers, which could be harnessed by creating talismans and amulets. And these amulets, these images, were believed to kind of be a conduit for those powers. So a good example of this is the planet Venus, which obviously symbolises love and beauty and luxury and all those lovely things, could be represented through images of roses, doves and hearts. You also have the colour green. This is associated with the heart chakra, could also feature in the design. And then once the planetary image is kind of conceptualized, it would then be infused with energy through various rituals and incantations. And this energy charged talisman, it might even be a piece of jewellery or another object, a brooch, could then be worn or carried and enable the bearer to access that planetary energy and gain from its influence. Giordano Bruno, who we mentioned earlier, was kind of highly skilled in the talismanic image magic, and the images he created were inspired by the book The Picatrix, which we mentioned in the Arabic magic episode, which is an extensive compilation of medieval Arabic astrological magic. Bruno's images reflect the art and culture of the Renaissance period, however, and are very beautiful to use in terms of practical magic. So an example of this can be seen in his description of the 7 images of Jupiter, which goes as follows. First image of Job. A nobleman upon a chariot drawn by a dragon, with an arrow in his right hand, which he hurls at the dragon's head. Second image of Jove. A man seated in a sedan chair, borne by 4 winged youths, leaning on leaving staves of beech. Third is one having the head of a ram, seated upon a wheel and bearing in his hands a vessel of balsam. Fourth is one having the head of a lion and the feet of an eagle, an oaken bough in his right hand, before whom move 2 youths of most beautiful appearance dressed in white. And these are like all different images of Jupiter. So you can think about the idea that each one of these images of Jupiter is almost like a different aspect. So if you're using all of these different images, you're building up this very powerful energy of Jupiter. And each of them is meant to really kind of represent a specific aspect of Jupiter's astrological powers. Agrippa von Nettersheim is also another prominent figure in the Renaissance magical tradition, who wrote extensively about talismans in his famous work, 3 books of occult philosophy. Cornelius Agrippa was born in Cologne in Germany in 1486, and he was the son of a nobleman and educated at the University of Cologne, where he studied law, medicine and theology. After completing his studies, Agrippa travelled to various parts of Europe, including Italy, where he studied under the famous humanist and poet Giovanni Pico della Mirandola. And then in 1509, Agrippa was appointed as a professor of Hebrew and Greek at the University of Dole in France. However, after a dispute with the university authorities, he left the position and moved to England, where he worked as a private tutor. Agrippa became interested in the occult during his time in England and began to write about magic and alchemy. And in 1510, he published a work called De Occulta Philosophia, which discussed various magical practices and rituals, And the book was controversial and drew the attention of the church at the time, which accused Agrippa of practicing witchcraft. And then he returned to Germany and continued to write anyway, ignoring what they said, and publishes his most famous work, which is the 3 books of occult philosophy in 1531. Agrippa made many contributions to magic and significantly influenced the founders of the Golden Dawn. And he believed that talismans were created by inscribing symbols or images onto a physical object and then consecrating them with a magical ritual and intention. And he believed that the power of talismans comes from their ability to connect the physical realm with the spiritual realm, allowing the wearer to access and harness the energies of the celestial bodies and the divine. He sees talismans as aligning himself with the forces of nature and the universe and manifesting one's desires. As he wrote, "Seeing there is a threefold world, one elementary, celestial and intellectual, and every inferior is governed by its superior and receiveth the influence of the virtues thereof, so that the very original and chief worker of all doth by angels, the heavens, stars, elements, planets, metals and stones, convey from himself the virtues of his omnipotency upon us, for whose service he made and created all these things. Wise men conceive it no way irrational that it should be possible for us to ascend by the same degrees through each world, to the same very original world itself, the maker of all things, and first cause from whence all things are and proceed, and also to enjoy not only these virtues which are already in the more excellent kind of things, but also besides these to draw new virtues from above." In his 3 books of occult philosophy, he also develops techniques for using talismanic images to key into astrological influences. For example, the talismanic image of the sun is described as follows: "A king, a crowned king clothed in saffron colours, sitting on a throne, holding a raven with a globe under his feet. Or a woman crowned with fire, dancing and laughing while standing on a 4-horsed chariot. In her right hand is a mirror or shield, in her left, leaning on her breast, is a staff." And although these images seem quite bizarre to our modern minds, it's got to be remembered they were designed to be work on a deep level of the unconscious. They act almost like dream symbols that can be understood through meditation and ritual work. Through working with the images, or almost like mandalas, you can attract the correct planetary forces into your lives. One of the most famous talismans associated with Agrippa is the Seal of Jupiter, which he believed could be used to increase wealth, honour and reputation. And this talisman was created by inscribing Jupiter's astrological symbol onto a tin disc and then consecrating it with prayer, incense and other ritual elements. And the property of this talisman was described as follows: "From the operations of Jupiter they made for prolongation of life, increaseth facility, riches, honour, and conferreth benevolence and prosperity, and frees from enemies, gives religious and glorious life and advancement of fortune." Another famous occultist from this period is Francis Barrett, who lived in the late 18th to early 19th century and is best known for his book The Magus, or Celestial Intelligencer. And this book covers a wide range of topics, including astrology, alchemy, divination and talismans. In the Magus, Barrett devotes quite a large amount of space to the subject of talismans, which he describes as magical objects imbued with specific properties or powers, or in his words, the talisman is a celestial influence reduced into writing or some other material substance, and thereby rendered permanent and efficacious. According to Francis King, the book could be more original and is a translation and a paraphrase of much of what Agrippa wrote. Agrippa's mentioned Johannes Trithemius, Peter d'Urbano's Imperatorium, and John Haydon's Harmony of the World. According to Barrett, talismans could be used for different purposes, so including protection, healing, etc. And he claimed that the power of a talisman came from its ability to harness the energy of the planets and the stars, and by creating a talisman at the right time and under the right conditions, a practitioner can imbue it with the desired power. So this is going back to the idea that I was talking about with regards to the astrological power of the talismans. In the Magus, Barrett gives readers a step-by-step guide to creating a variety of different talismans, including those for love, wealth and protection. And he also advised that one should determine the desired outcome and choose the appropriate planetary correspondences and materials. The talisman would then be created during the appropriate planetary hour under specific astrological conditions and with the proper rituals and invocations. And the most crucial aspect of Barrett's philosophy was the magician would connect the lower earthly elements with the divine source behind them and then charge the talisman with divine energy. As he wrote, with an ideal virtue, the heavens and stars as instruments disposing the matter in the mean, while for the receiving of those forms which reside in divine majesty, and to be conveyed by stars, and the giver of forms distributes them by the ministry of his intelligences, which he has ordained as rulers and controllers over his works, to whom such a power is entrusted in things committed to them, so that all virtue in stones, herbs, metals, and other things may come from the intelligences, the governors. Therefore, the form and virtue of things comes first from the ideas, then from the ruling and governing intelligences, then from the aspects of the heavens disposing, and lastly from the tempers of the elements disposed, answering the influences of the heavens, by which the elements themselves are ordered or disposed. These kinds of operations, therefore, are performed in these inferior things by express forms, and in the heavens by disposing virtues, intelligences, by mediating rules, in the original cause by ideas and exemplary forms, all of which must by necessity agree in the execution of the effect and virtue of everything. There is therefore a wonderful virtue and operation in every herb and stone, but greater in a star, beyond which, even from the governing intelligences, everything receives and obtains many things for itself, especially from the supreme cause, with whom all things mutually and exactly correspond, agreeing in a harmonious consent. And that's a quote from Francis Barrett. So as we can see from that text, the critical aspect in the creation of the talisman is not in the sigils and images used, but rather the ability of the magician to link the physical object, the stone, the metal, to the divine ideas and exemplary forms that are infused into them by God and his ruling intelligences, as well as the heavenly bodies, so the astrological aspects. It also suggests a complex hierarchy of spiritual and cosmic forces are at work in talismanic magic, with each level contributing to the ultimate power and efficacy of the talisman. and the idea of the supreme cause and the harmonious correspondence of all things implies a belief in a fundamentally ordered and interconnected universe in which every object and phenomenon has its unique place and purpose. Barrett's work is quite detailed in terms of how to create talismans. He includes lots of images of planetary talismans in his books as well. One image that's quite well known shows his planetary talisman as two discs of appropriate metal joined by a line of cloth tape, each with two fields, a centre and a circumference. And in the centre of one of the discs is the magical square of the planet, which is the sign of the planet, and the appropriate Hebrew name of God. And then around the circumference is the number of the spirit of the planet and the name of the planet's intelligence. And the talisman to Jupiter is described as follows. The seal of Jupiter is thus made, and under this seal is good to be carried when seeking wealth, honours or happiness, or when endeavouring to secure any great good or blessing. It renders the wearer courteous, amiable and attractive, and brings him into the notice of favour of those in power or authority. Barrett also included images of the planets, which are quite similar to those that were given by Agrippa. And he also mentions techniques for making pentacles that are similar to those in the Key of Solomon. And these pentacles contain characters of good spirits, sacred pictures of holy letters or revelations with apt and proper versicles composed of geometric figures. Despite the popularity of the Magus during its time, it received quite a lot of criticism from some of its contemporaries. They accused Barrett of promoting dangerous practices and things like that. But nevertheless, the Magus is, it's a really important work in the history of occultism and magical practice, and it's inspired many different people over the years as well. So in conclusion, the magical use of talismans during this period, really played an important role in shaping the intellectual and spiritual landscape of the era. It was a time when magicians explored the universe and were really kind of searching to unlock the secrets of creation through the power of symbols and talismans. And these Renaissance thinkers truly believed, I think, that by creating magical talismans imbued with magical meanings, they could harness the energy of the cosmos and bring about positive changes. As Pico della Mirandola wrote in his oration on the dignity of man, "We have made neither of heaven nor of earth, neither mortal nor immortal, so that with freedom of choice and with honour, as thought the maker and moulder of thyself, thou mayest fashion thyself in whatever shape thou shalt prefer. Thou shalt have the power out of thy soul's judgment to be reborn into the higher forms which are divine." That's all we've got time for in this episode. However, in the next episode we will be continuing our discussion on the history of magical talismans by looking at some of the talismans of the early modern period. So if you've enjoyed this episode and want to find out more, then please stay tuned. And I wanted to finish this episode with a poem by Walter de la Mare, which, whilst not being from the Renaissance, I thought was quite magical, so I thought I would share. This is The Listeners. "Is there anybody there?" said the traveller, knocking on the moonlit door, and his horse in the silence champed the grasses of the forest's ferny floor. And a bird flew up out of the turret above the traveller's head, and he smote upon the door again a second time. "Is there anybody there?" he said. But no one descended to the traveller. No head from the leaf-fringed sill leaned over and looked into his grey eyes, where he stood perplexed and still. But only a host of phantom listeners that dwelt in the lone house then stood listening in the quiet of the moonlight to that voice from the world of men, stood thronging the faint moonbeams on the dark stair that goes down to the empty hall, hearkening in an air stirred and shaken by the lonely traveller's call. And he felt in his heart their strangeness, their stillness answering his cry, while his horse moved, cropping the dark turf 'neath the starred and leafy sky. For he suddenly smote on the door even louder and lifted his head. "Tell them I came," and no one answered, "that I kept my word," he said. Never the least stir made the listeners, though every word he spake fell echoing through the shadowness of the still house, from the one man left awake. Aye, they heard his foot upon the stirrup, and the sound of iron on stone, and how the silence surged softly backward when the plunging hooves were gone.